Ash is what was left when I collapsed at work. Burnt out, discarded, the remnants of who I used to be. Iron is who I became after the fire. The self that was forged when the old one couldn't survive. This is Ash and Iron, a podcast for anyone who's been broken by the systems they were told to trust, and rebuilt themselves anyway. For the ones who burned out, for the ones who were pushed past their limits, for the ones who were told to be grateful for exhaustion, for the ones who walked through the fire and came out unrecognizable to who they were before. Here, we talk about collapse without shame and transformation without apology. I'm Aiden, and this is the space where we sift through the ash, name what burned, and claim the iron that remains. Welcome to Ash and Iron. Let's begin. Before we begin, let me state for the record that all workplaces, names, and locations have been changed, and these are reimagined narratives inspired by true events. Not to protect them, but to protect me from summoning the pugnacious corporate Beetlejuice back into my inbox. The last time he appeared, he brought a spreadsheet, the 11th plague, and a tone that suggested my humanity was optional. Honestly, I'm still waiting for FEMA to declare that email a disaster zone. Alright, into the fire we go. In the last episode, I told you the moment Hopscotch realized I was no longer edible. No longer a battery, no longer the trembling little creature they could siphon dry at 4:55 p.m. And when a control hierarchy built on fear discovers you are no longer afraid, it doesn't celebrate your evolution. It fucking trembles. Because predators expect you to run. They expect you to bow. They expect you to break. What they never expect, what they cannot fathom, is the moment you turn around and look them dead in the eye without fear. That was the moment the pastel-drenched hierarchy felt the shift. The moment the feeding chain tasted my silence and realized it wasn't submission. It was sovereignty. I was the proverbial Maleficent, and I had found my wings. And Hopscotch, like all cults, reacted the only way it knows how. With retaliation disguised as concern. With sabotage disguised as structure. With pastel-polished panic masquerading as professionalism. Here's the thing about systems built on illusion, though. They crack the moment someone speaks the truth without fear. And I did. Calmly, clearly, without raising my voice. I refused to be manipulated into control, and they fucking felt it. So today, we're stepping into the part of the story where the cult hive panics. Where the walls flicker, not from hunger, but from confusion. Where Sherry, the apex demon, realizes the archangel she depended on has stepped into his own wings. Where the hierarchy discovers that the power they fed on now stands above them. Welcome back to Ash and Iron, and if the feeding chamber unsettled you, wait until you see what happens when the sovereign walks back into the hive. Once a cult realizes its favorite prey has grown wings and teeth, it doesn't retreat, it retaliates. And Hopscotch's retaliation didn't come as a scream, it came as a whisper. A soft, pastel-polished, "We need to talk about your performance." The kind of message that pretends to be harmless while sharpening its teeth behind the screen. The kind of message that revealed Sherry was pulling out her bag of pip candy. Ironic, considering less than a month prior, my performance review was glowing. The day after I stopped feeding them, Hopscotch tried to put me back on the menu. The lights flickered, not with hunger this time, but with confusion. The building didn't understand why its favorite battery wasn't panicking on cue. And then Sherry appeared. Not physically. Sherry never needed to appear physically. She materialized as an incoming Teams call, like a demon with perfect posture. And when I answered, the HR coven was already there, because I wasn't prey anymore, and Sherry felt it. The HR coven felt it. The demonic vampire organism of Hopscotch felt it, not as a ripple, but as a detonation. The moment their faces appeared, the temperature in my office dropped 10 degrees. Not metaphorically, not emotionally, physically. Like the building itself had reached through the Wi-Fi to reclaim me. Sherry sat there, with the expression of someone who believes she invented professionalism. The HR coven hovered beside her, smiling the way people smile when they're about to support you into an early grave. And before I could even say hello, Sherry launched into it. We've been noticing some shifts in your performance. Shifts. The word hung in the air like a pastel-colored guillotine. Not even 30 days earlier, these same people were praising my work like I was the second coming of agile methodology. But now that I'd stopped feeding them, suddenly I was a concern. We're worried you're becoming disengaged. Disengaged. The corporate exorcism word. The word they use when what they really mean is, you're not panicking the way we need you to. The HR coven nodded in unison, like a trio of bobbleheads enchanted to agree with whatever Sherry said. And then she pulled out the candy. The pip candy. We think it might be helpful to put together a performance improvement plan. Helpful. The same way a coffin is helpful for someone who's still breathing. I didn't react. I didn't flinch. I didn't give them a single drop of the panic they were trying to extract. And that's when it happened. The flicker. Not from my lights, from theirs. For the first time, I watched them glitch. Sherry's camera froze. HR's audio crackled like a dying spell. The entire call stuttered, like the system itself couldn't process what was happening. Because I wasn't afraid, and Hopscotch didn't know what to do with that. Predators don't know how to feed on someone who doesn't bleed. The HR coven smiled at me like they were unveiling a birthday cake instead of a corporate execution device. And why the hell was Benny the Badger on this call? Grinning from ear to ear? And on a burnout badger? That's a big fucking grin. Sherry cleared her throat, the universal signal for, I'm about to lie professionally. We think a performance improvement plan would really help you get back on track. Back on track. As if I had derailed myself. As if the tracks weren't laid by the same people who lit them on fire. I didn't blink. I didn't panic. I didn't give them anything. Instead, I tilted my head. Just slightly. The way you do when you're examining a creature that thinks it's dangerous. No, I said. Soft, even, unapologetic. And the call froze. Not my camera, not my Wi-Fi, theirs. Sherry's smile pixelated into a grimace. HR's faces stuttered like the enchantment holding them together had cracked. The entire team's call glitched as if the system itself couldn't process the refusal. Because Hopscotch had never heard that word from me before. Not spoken calmly, not spoken clearly, not spoken without fear. And here's the part I didn't understand until that moment. I wasn't the only battery in Hopscotch. Everyone was being drained. Everyone was edible. But I was their favorite flavor. My panic hit different. My competence burned cleaner. My clarity fed the hive like premium fuel. They didn't just feed on me, they depended on me. I wasn't the only source. I was the strongest one. And when the hive loses its favorite flavor, it doesn't starve quietly. It riots. Sherry recovered first, but only barely. Aiden, I don't think you understand what a pip means. I smiled, not wide, not mocking, just enough to let her know the hierarchy was no longer the apex predator in the room. I understand exactly what it means, I said, and I'm not signing one. Silence. Not the polite kind, not the corporate kind. The kind that happens when a ritual collapses mid-chant. The entire HR coven blinked rapidly, flipping through their internal handbook, trying to find the chapter titled, What to Do When the Battery Says No. This is a standard process. No, I repeated. Not louder, just firmer. A stone dropped into a still lake. And that was the moment the building felt it, even through the screen. The pastel-painted organism that fed on my panic felt the absence of it. Like a missing limb, like a severed artery, like a detonation. The hierarchy didn't know it yet, but the feeding chain had just snapped. Because I wasn't prey anymore, and predators don't know what to do with something they can't consume. Refusing a pip doesn't end the ritual, it breaks it. And when you break a ritual designed to drain you, the entire demonic vampire nest reacts like you just pissed in the sacred fountain. The HR Coven's smiles cracked like cheap porcelain. Benny the burnout badger stopped grinning, which frankly was the most terrifying part. A burnout badger only stops smiling when the feeding cycle collapses, or when someone microwaves fish in the break room. Sherry blinked at me like I had spoken in tongues, which, to be fair, I kind of had. Because in Hopscotch, no is not a word, it's a malfunction. She tried to recover, tried to reassert dominance, tried to pull out the "I'm disappointed" tone middle managers practice in the mirror, like it's a TED Talk. "Aiden," she said, "this isn't optional." And something ancient in me woke up, something sovereign, something done. "It is for me," I said, in a voice older and more powerful than any demon in that pastel cult meeting. And that was it. The pastel cathedral shuddered. The team's call glitched again. Not a normal glitch, not a "the Wi-Fi is trash" glitch. This was a spiritual buffering, a metaphysical 404 error. The entire Hopscotch hive mind paused, like it was trying to reboot the simulation. Because I wasn't supposed to say that. I wasn't supposed to break the script. I wasn't supposed to step out of the feeding chain and into my own power. But I did, and the hive felt it. Sherry opened her mouth to speak, probably to unleash some corporate incantation like, "This is a growth opportunity," or "We're concerned about your tone." But nothing came out. Nothing. The HR Coven stared at me like I had slapped a holy relic out of their hands. Benny's camera froze mid-blink, making him look like he was having a small stroke. The building itself flickered like a dying star. And in that silence, in that glitch, in that moment where the entire pastel-painted demonic ecosystem realized I was no longer edible, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Not the kind they fed on, not the kind they stole, not the kind they dangled like a treat. My own. And Hopscotch felt it too. And they fucking panicked. Before we continue, I need to remind a very specific subset of listeners. The ones who somehow hear a story about a pastel-drenched demonic vampire panic cult and go, "Wow, this feels personal." That everything in this universe is fictional. Fictional events, fictional timelines, fictional rituals, fictional demonic vampires running a panic-powered corporate cult. Every name, every job title, every role, every character has been changed, rearranged, scrambled, exercised, or yeeted into a blender to ensure no one accidentally identifies themselves as a soul-siphoning HR witch, a demonic energy harvesting entity, or a burnout badger with a clipboard. If you hear this and think, "Oh no, this sounds like my office," that's not on me. That's between you, your HR coven, and whatever pastel-coated demon is running your crisis-powered feeding chain. Jesus Christ, I can't believe I had to say that 3 times. Anyways, back to the cult. Hopscotch wasn't done. A panic-powered cult doesn't just malfunction, it mutates. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in supernatural demonic corporate desperation. First, the emails changed tone. They went from, "Hey Aiden, looping back," to, "Hey Aiden, urgent, need answers now," to, "Hey Aiden, please confirm you're still committed to your role." Committed to my role? Bitch, I'm not joining your coven. I'm just trying to pay my rent. Then came the calendar invites. Dozens of them. Meetings I wasn't invited to. Meetings I was invited to but didn't exist. Meetings that appeared, disappeared, then reappeared like a cursed Pokemon. One invite literally said, mandatory optional sync. What the fuck does that even mean? Pick a lane. Then the HR coven tried the concerned friend routine. The soft voices, the tilted heads, the classic, hey, we just want to check in on how you're feeling. How I'm feeling? I'm feeling like you're trying to spiritually mug me through a webcam, Renee. Then middle management got involved. They started popping into my DMs like cult acolytes who'd lost their script. Hey Aiden, just wanted to touch base. Touch base? Touch grass. One of them even sent me a gif of a cat hanging from a branch with the caption, hang in there. Sir, I am not hanging, I am ascending. Then the building itself joined the retaliation. My lights flickered in Morse code. My laptop fan screamed like it was trying to summon a lesser demon. My team status kept switching to away, even while I was typing. Like the hive was trying to convince itself I didn't exist. At one point, my mouse moved on its own. Not a glitch, not a lag, a deliberate, slow drag across the screen. Like the building was trying to click me into a meeting I didn't accept. And the worst part? The printer. The cursed toner dust vomiting portal, where corporate Beetlejuice lives, woke up. It printed a single blank page, just one, completely empty, except for a faint watermark that looked suspiciously like a screaming face. Hopscotch wasn't just panicking, it was summoning. Because when a panic-powered cult loses its food source, it doesn't calm down. It doesn't self-reflect. It doesn't go to therapy. It escalates, it scrambles, it ritualizes. It tries every trick, every tactic, every supernatural HR spell in its arsenal to drag you back into the feeding chain. But I wasn't going back. Not this time, not ever. Let me tell you something about chaos. It never stays chaotic for long. Not in a cult, especially ones run by demonic soul-sucking vampires. Once the hive finished convulsing, once the panic-powered rituals sputtered out, once the printer exhausted whatever demon it was channeling, Hopscotch did what all demonic vampire cults do when their feeding cycle collapses. It recalibrated. The chaos didn't stop, it focused. The emails slowed. The calendar invites stopped multiplying like cursed gremlins. The HR coven went silent, which was somehow worse. Because silence in a panic-powered cult isn't peace, it's strategy. And I felt it. That shift in the air, that tightening of the hive's collective throat, that moment when the organism stops thrashing and starts thinking. Hopscotch wasn't flailing anymore, it was hunting. The first sign was subtle. A Teams notification that didn't belong to any channel I was in. A ghost ping, a phantom alert, a message that appeared for half a second and vanished before I could click it. Then my Outlook search bar stopped working. Not broken, blocked. Like the hive didn't want me looking for anything. Then my VPN kicked me off. Twice, then again, then again. Like the building was trying to sever my tether to the outside world. Then, the documents. Files I hadn't touched in weeks, suddenly marked as recently edited. Folders I didn't open, showing last accessed 2 minutes ago. Drafts I didn't write appearing in my autosave. The hive wasn't malfunctioning anymore. It was reaching. Reaching for the flavor it couldn't replicate. Reaching for the power it couldn't synthesize. Reaching for the one employee whose panic tasted like power. And when reaching didn't work, it escalated. A meeting invite appeared. Not from Sherry. Not from HR. Not from any manager I recognized. Just a name I'd never seen before. A name that felt wrong. Like it had been generated by a demon who skimmed a corporate directory once and said, yeah, that looks human enough. The subject line? Immediate alignment required. No context, no agenda, no explanation. Just those 3 words, pulsing like a heartbeat. And the location? Hopscotch, sublevel. Hopscotch doesn't have a sublevel, at least not one they tell employees about. I stared at the invite, and for the first time in this entire pastel-drenched nightmare, I felt the hive looking back at me. Not the people, not the managers, not the HR coven, the organism itself. The thing beneath the pastel paint, the thing that feeds on panic, the thing that had been starving for days from its main power source. And now it wanted me back, but I wasn't going. Not to sublevel, not to the feeding chamber, not to whatever ritual they thought they could drag me into next. Because when a pastel-drenched, panic-powered cult run by demonic vampire predators loses its favorite flavor, it doesn't beg, it hunts. But here's the thing about predators. When the hunt fails, they don't give up. They change tactics. Hopscotch didn't come at me with claws next. It came at me with care. The kind of care that feels like a warm blanket, until you realize it's been soaked in chloroform. The first message arrived at 7:12 a.m., bright and pastel, like a hostage note written in highlighter. Hey Aiden, just checking in. We're worried about you. Worried. The word HR uses when they're sharpening the guillotine behind their back. Then came another. We've noticed you seem overwhelmed. We want to support you. Support. The corporate synonym for hold still while we tighten the leash. And then the piece de resistance. We care about your well-being. Bitch, you do not. You care about your power grid. But the hive didn't stop there. Oh no. This was a full-scale concern offensive. Middle managers I hadn't spoke to in years suddenly remembered I existed. Hey buddy, how are you holding up? Just wanted to check in on your mental health. You've been so quiet lately. Everything okay? Everything okay? You tried to pit me like a sacrificial goat 48 hours ago. Now you're my emotional support demon? Please. And the tone. God, the tone. Soft, warm, honeyed. Like they'd all attended a workshop titled How to Weaponize Empathy Without Getting HR Complaints. They tilted their heads in emails. You could hear the tilt. They used emojis. Emojis. One manager sent me a message with a little heart at the end. A heart. Sir, you tried to spiritually mug me through a webcam 2 days ago. Do not send me a heart. But the hive was not done. When concern doesn't land, it escalates into guilt-laced concern. The kind that sounds like care, but tastes like control. We're just worried you're isolating yourself. Translation, you're not feeding us. We miss your presence in meetings. Translation, your panic was delicious. We're concerned you're withdrawing from the team. Translation, your silence is starving us. And then the real dagger. You used to be so reliable. Ah, there it is. The guilt hook. The cult's favorite fishing lure. Because nothing feeds a panic-powered hive like a reliable employee who thinks reliability is a moral obligation. But I didn't bite. I didn't respond. I didn't reassure. I didn't apologize for existing. And that's when the concern mutated again into something sweeter, stickier, more dangerous. Performative empathy. The kind where they pretend to care about your feelings so they can get access to them. We just want to understand what you're going through. No, you don't. We're here if you need to talk. No, you're not. We're worried you're not yourself lately. I'm exactly myself. You just don't like who I am when I'm not afraid. And the hive felt it. The absence of panic, the absence of guilt, the absence of the emotional leakage they'd grown addicted to. Concern didn't work, empathy didn't work, guilt didn't work. So Hopscotch did what all pastel-drenched panic cults do when their favorite flavor won't come back to the feeding chain. It switched to feedback. But not real feedback. Gaslighting disguised as guidance. It may sound cold, but where was all the concern, empathy, and guilt when I actively said I was drowning for the past 5 years? And that's where things got truly unhinged. The first email arrived with the subject line, clarifying expectations. Ah yes, the corporate equivalent of gaslight me gently. Inside was a list of recent performance concerns that read like they'd been written by a demon who skimmed my personnel file once and then filled in the rest with fan fiction. We've noticed a decline in your engagement. I had attended every meeting, I had delivered every task, I had responded to every message. Your communication has become inconsistent. Translation, you stopped apologizing for existing. Your attitude has shifted. Translation, you stopped bleeding on cue. And then came the peace day bullshit. We're concerned you may be misinterpreting our intentions. Ah, there it is, the gaslighter's mating call. Because nothing says we're manipulating you, like accusing you of misinterpreting the manipulation. But the hive didn't stop there. The next message was from the HR coven, a pastel-polished novella titled Opportunities for Growth. Opportunities, the word they use when they're about to blame you for the fire they started. Inside were bullet points that made me question whether I had slipped into an alternate dimension. Improve responsiveness. I had responded faster than the demons summoning me. Increase collaboration. I had collaborated so hard I practically fused with the Teams interface. Demonstrate more initiative. I had been initiative-ing my ass off for months. But the hive wasn't done rewriting my reality. A manager I barely knew sent me a DM. We've noticed you've been less positive lately. Less positive? Sir, I refused a pip. I didn't drown a puppy. Then came the classic, we're just trying to help you succeed. No, you're not. You're trying to get me back into the panic-powered hamster wheel so you can siphon my emotional electrolytes like Gatorade. And then the most unhinged line of all. We're concerned you're not seeing the full picture. The full picture? I was the full picture. I was the one holding the projector, the screen, and the HDMI cable. But that's the thing about gaslighting disguised as feedback. It's not meant to correct you. It's meant to destabilize you, to make you doubt your memory, your competence, your instincts, your sovereignty. Because a destabilized employee is easier to drain. But I didn't destabilize. I didn't wobble. I didn't fold. I read every line of their pastel-polished fiction and felt nothing but clarity. And once you've seen the hive for what it is, once you've watched the rituals glitch, once you've felt the feeding chain snap, you can't unsee it. And Hopscotch could feel that too. The gaslighting didn't land. The feedback didn't hook. The manipulation didn't take. So the hive did what all starving organisms do when subtlety fails. It escalated again. And this time it wasn't DMs, it wasn't concern, it was the shift. The kind of shift you don't hear, you feel. Like the air pressure dropping before a storm. Like the moment a predator stops circling and starts calculating. The hive went quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Not resting quiet. The kind of quiet that means something ancient is inhaling. The kind of quiet that means the organism has stopped flailing and started planning. Because Hopscotch had tried everything. Panic, punishment, concern, guilt, empathy, gaslighting, ritual, summoning, sub-level invitations from demons with LinkedIn profiles. And none of it worked. None of it got me back into the feeding chain. None of it made me edible again. So the hive did the only thing left in its arsenal. It waited. Predators don't always pounce. Sometimes they crouch. Sometimes they watch. Sometimes they pull back into the shadows and let the silence do the stalking. And that's what Hopscotch did. The emails stopped. The pings stopped. The phantom alerts stopped. Even the printer, the cursed toner vomiting portal to corporate Beetlejuice, went still. The hive wasn't reaching anymore. It was coiling. Because when a panic-powered demonic vampire cult masked with pastel loses its favorite flavor, and every tactic fails, and every ritual collapses, and every manipulation falls flat, it doesn't retreat, it recalculates. And I could feel it. That tightening in the air, that low hum beneath the drywall, that psychic static that meant the organism wasn't done. It was regrouping. It was studying me. It was preparing its next move. And for the first time since this pastel-drenched nightmare began, I realized something that should have terrified me but didn't. The hive was not the only thing changing. I was changing too. Because once you step out of the feeding chain, once you taste your own power again, once you see the hive for what it is, you don't go back. You can't. And Hopscotch knew it. That's why the silence felt different. Not empty, not defeated, focused. The kind of focus that means the next move won't be subtle. It won't be pastel. It won't be polite. It will be a reckoning. And that's where we're going next. Because episode 5 isn't about panic. It isn't about fear. It isn't about the hive hunting me. It's about what happens when the sovereign stops running and turns around. It's about what happens when the prey becomes the witness, when the battery becomes the breaker, when the favorite flavor becomes the one thing the hive can't swallow. It's about what happens when the chaos engine finally meets resistance. So take a breath, steady yourself, because the next episode is not about survival. It's about the reckoning. If this offends you or makes you feel called out or seen, that's just the Cursed Employee of the Month plaque whispering your name again. All workplaces, names, and locations have been changed for fear of corporate Beetlejuice materializing in my inbox and demanding another meeting with Benny the Badger that should have been an exorcism, performed by someone with OSHA certification. See you in the ashes.